Hello, there's an Allegro's Cafe who has people with the name Fienza and that said that that's them that owns a building next to Fox Connecticut News. And there's a guy, I think that's the son of the guy who started Allegro's Cafe, who was reportedly a neighbor, or his family's a neighbor of an Enzo Fanzo, and who lived across the street, or his cousin did, and his cousin is involved with Two Route Highway. Across the street from his house is a Sal Civiello, who was involved with my fourth grade class, with people in my third grade class, fourth grade class, and fifth grade class. They're putting fake things in databases, and they lie behind my back to people in my second grade class. People don't even know the names of them. These are people putting fake things in databases with a whole bunch of different countries at the same time. I never had a conversation. I don't know if that's him. There was someone that non-verbally, he came charged down the stairs behind me. They locked me in that place too, in the hallway of that club there. I don't know if they still own the club there. It goes through different ownerships that are involved with the intelligence there, with FBI Director Robert Luskin and co-defendants of his, involved with a whole bunch of different nations at the same time. Co-defendants of his in a 2006 district court case, which they were recorded also before the World Trade Center attack, intercities and intra-cities of Connecticut, and inter-campus and intra-campuses of Connecticut, putting predicate acts with facts methods, identity theft, fraud, slanders, roles, and styles, uses of their own differences of other people's differences, criminally born influence, tactically delusions, raw. I don't know if that was James Comey in the Britain Superior Court. There was a guy that looked just like him, though. And the FBI has rules of wire crime acts and methods of Wethersfield police, changing and faking what's digitally recorded, and tied to the rules of wire crime acts and methods. And Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with them at the police station. That wasn't at all when I was a kid, and then as an adult. And the kids who did go down there and speak to the police station, they forced, tricked her, and persuaded them to collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Some way they had self-value rules with that. As their rules, too, at campuses behind people's back, putting fake things in campuses, trying to make fake exceptions that show the same thing. As their collusions, too, with all sides of criminal and civil cases, where they're using subject treatments to leave out what's actually recorded value. Just totally faking and making things up. And increasingly, people that have been seating juries are also criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, roles with this. All kinds of natures of organized crimes with the same house/S tied to them. A Dillon family is one of the people, and Enzo Fianza and his cousin, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Also, there are people, male and female, with the intelligence at Hartford courts, in the Britain Superior Court, and Connecticut's District Court, who have been roles with predicate acts with facts methods with people on Elm Streets in Wethersfield and Rocky Hill, and with people with conjunctions to it, like the state judicial branch opposite, and conjunctions to it and to that, like Route 3, and conjunctions to that, like Hangdog Lane. A bunch of people in Hangdog Lane I don't know at all, and ones are involved with people, ones I don't know at all, except for that they went out their way to make confessions and demonstrations to me about their roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders. One of the things they have tied is some KKK black theme, Latino theme, Confederate flag theme, and the rules with families of interbranch and intelligence tied to them, foreign and domestic, at the same time planting evidences with the same house/S with wire crimes of the Wethersfield police. And police phones families have roles of the World Trade Center attack effectively pulled off. Also, because they had roles of torture with those wire crime acts and methods too. And the breaching method showed them that's one of the things that they had to hide roles with. It showed them how to do it. It shows them how to read the laws. Replacing in self-body roles, replacing what James Madison and our founders communicated about the breaching method's uses of reassigning what nature communicates with black pupils, white survive. And nature's itself its communications are also replaced. And there are self-body roles with that, otherwise that body is sensed. And we can observe this, but it instantly brings up collusion / S only capable of being at all sides of criminal and civil cases in the courts at the same time the intelligence hides them. They can't afford to have discerned what witch trials are about. In the witch trials place right next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. And they still have other communicated about that place than James Madison and our founders communicated to have communicated for themselves. Plural. They, first of all, that and how they wanted us to understand themselves as James Madison, the person. Them plural. How they went and got James Madison to counter-extort the rest of the founders, including George Washington. But no one will allow honesty regarding the extortion of George Washington. How that's gotten away with. Everyone has rolled self-body with criminally poured influence, tactically delusions, raw fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature, of the names of the people of the sciences. Nature as criminal and ceaseless natures of positive treatments and negative treatments and name treatments / hypercriminally foreign influence. Because we're going to appreciate that. How non-distinctly the northern colonies and southern colonies before America's founders were born, there had been a fact, human nature, torture, extortion, slavery method, and all roles of that body was sensed, and that was adapted to method entrenched. It had been sustained against Native Americans, same way it had been sustained against the Europeans and the people from the countries of Africa, of the continent of Africa. We have been names A through Z used as systems tactical terror from the human species body of individual bodies, with all group differences generated by itself, that which has generated the other species body so we can discern it. Its own identity of value / value progression. Its own distinct identity of simultaneous nature. Black people's beard. In other words, we leave this not. We cannot leave this out. All this time they have shown us the suburbs have all kinds of archaeological, hyper archaeological, if you will, but archaeological proofs of the suburbs designed for a torture, extortion, fact, human nature, slavery method. The only reason this appears debatable is because if campuses A through Z came through, other things, others ourselves, were blamed for things our founders communicated for us to blame on the human fact, human nature breaching method. And the words of our founders were used, leaving out what they declassified about how no one had free speech, and how everyone's speech had to have an extent of collusion / S against themselves and against everyone else. Otherwise, that body was sensed and it was adapted to, including if that was that body was a majority of people, including if it was everybody, black pupils. Yeah. To see the hyperclear attack. Pantheism will lead us through appreciation of isms to be led by that which is functional being hyper invisible, but still discernible. It shows us if someone's leaving out the smallest finite detail, let alone the finite details, group ones and simultaneous ones at the same time, the hyper simultaneous. We aren't even allowed to, how we have religious rights? Even Native Americans are not even allowed religious rights. How can they, the ground before them, its identity relationship to itself, and then further with its role, like with the water and stuff like that. All that is tactically denatured. not just because industry was put on top of the water for reasons known, but more so because of breaching method put it on there, put the nature there, held it there too. And what that caused, and what roles with it caused, it kept and keeps that the nature's demonstrations of that too. It recorded, blamed up for everyone's roles, styles, blaming, forcing it, blamed on other things others themselves. So we have to address the collusions with the predicate acts with facts methods and with the crime scenes and the difference of the guilt. Sometimes in some ways it's more there. Sometimes, well, all sides of cases in the courts at the same time, putting the same sequences with the news at the same time, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, even when they're not in the cases. That's what's recorded. I'll gather around some start to pace. So this breaching method knew that there were not enough jobs in New York City, not worth, let alone the worth they should be for people that are tortured, extorted, and back human nature enslaved, therefore physically. Because that's what it is. Anyone who wants to debate that the suburbs were designed this way, let alone the cities. And they even have it with the suburban/urban and the syntax with the certain type of victim/hyper victim. Only capable of blaming other things, others herself. Only capable of hiding, concealing how the breaching method had appreciated values and the difference of voting, the difference of candidates, parties, exceptions. Our founders told us to get the Constitution unabridged. We could discern them still roles with currently foreign influence, fact, nature, quality aspects, nature. We're supposed to be allowed to use short words regarding that. They're making examples of themselves with free speech as punks to pretend that to keep pretending to be for things that they're against. At the same time, pretends debatable things before courts. In other words, little rat chaps with their differences and with other people's differences. Guys keep other things, others themselves, blamed for the human fact, human nature breaching method. The torture, extortion, slavery method clearer than day against the people behind, in the background of rap videos. In the suburbs. Suburbs were designed before America's founders were born with slavery and crazy international laws against anyone even speaking about building infrastructure outside of internationally monitored conversations. With those international rules, with slavery entrenched, and then America's founders were born. Rules that had been. And no one had free speech. They had to hide their rules countering, even in the extent they could counter. They communicated this to us too. They declassified with it. Why is it not appreciated when they read their words? Because all fake were shown. They need to hide that by valuing their words that contain quality aspects in nature of collusion/S they didn't want. They had to pretend other to an extent/S. They wanted us to understand that. Method/S. Everyone was forced to be the /S roles. And that could never make an identity of unity or independence capable of countering the breaching method that was entrenched right through not just America's founding, pounding drums. Already Russians and China, people from China had been here. But China and America still doesn't have an identity as that which is the human species body of individual bodies, where it's talking about our differences. These are suits and ties, counters, exceptions, and the whole array as a collusion. Being and having been systems tactically ulterior from its own. The subject of yin and yang. The subject/S that yin and yang is about, rather. And alpha and omega. It is more probable the alpha and omega that yin and yang were revealed to be taught together by the campus that doesn't work properly without the pantheism and without exceptions to the campus's system. to be and stay led by how, where, and how and why it is functional. That and how it is distinctly hyper invisible, but from how it is invisible but still discernible. It is that very body that we are discerning that is not our species body, is not the other species bodies, but is all things anyway. In other words, it is that very body that we're discerning when we discern why and how we need to appreciate more than one verb, word for verb. We're discerning why it's a portion of its body. Where and how we are capable of discerning a hyper invisible but still discernible the future that is not even here yet. Like, for example, the season. We are shown their ever increasing value, even if they never come here again. They never make it around. We are shown how they share an identity, while not, but anyway, and how and why. We are shown what is projecting all things, including the criminal insidiousness we are shown to force to respect. And the campuses kept us. We had everything different. The difference of their collusion, though, or the branches, or the overt criminal enterprise, private ones. But then the difference of that too was it explained. So it's increasingly time collusion self-valued by them. The FBI directors can't defend their speech, positive or negative, about the FBI, without confessing things, demonstrating things to the breaching method. Same thing at those other countries. This breaching method showed them the names of the people of the sciences and of the religions. They can't afford to have them spoken for in sequence truth. With sequence truth, there are sequence shifting styles for needs and natures that nature forces manifest, but also the breaching method forces it. Everything the breaching method does and forces is through our own. So the trail of it, when nature demonstrates that later, is also a whole bunch of people and things, needs, nature's roles, and phenomena that keeps itself left out through ourselves, self-value roles. Otherwise, that body is sensed, including that body is a majority of people, including that body is everyone. Any grouping of nations, while locations, areas, and states are still used remotely. Syntax, nature, quality aspects, nature used remotely, creating foreign influence / hypercriminally foreign influence. Excuse me. / tactically delusions, Rob. Boxing is fought, but by the rules, but the rules have stood abridged. So its fruits and gifts and means from nowhere have not come. Boxing is fun, one web, a minute bread. All shadow box. The human species body of individual bodies, some rest, I tell best. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are grouped by nature. The same nature that is the subject of both Alpha and Omega and of the Quran. Or the Quran's about Allah, or the Old Testament's about Jesus. You guys are sequence shifting. The Old Testament comes with a part that says only defend right here, where the names of the people of the sciences will come together. And the part that comes before it, no one even knows about that part. No one even speaks about it, even though it says only defend right here. The Quran also has a part right up front that says all that matters is if someone's going to be honest about their scientific use, their use of the word Allah, the name Allah, for the identity of all space / existence. Per my translation of it, English translation of Arabic, but also of nature itself shows us. We need to name per science that distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous nature. And we're not supposed to agree about the name. We're supposed to force people to agree about the name. And we're supposed to love them if they don't agree about the name we want to use for it. And it's only one thing, but it has more than one name. In other words, because where it shows us, it is functional, being hyper invisible distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. So we're speaking about a name, we're speaking about invisible but still discernible. We're not being led by the hyper invisible but still discernible, which we are capable of being led by. Black pupils. It is surging through all things, alone, and even through the force, even through what is force while not as force. Why is the force anyway? And many pray. Each campus failed you hard and long and well, and deep and vast. Each class. And each role had that against them too. Well played. And many prayed, but it has failed to receive us unabridged. Black pupils peer. All about some shadow box, some pace, some rest. In other words, no game. Get me up for the paid conversation with WFSB. I want a response for the principal child abusers campus. There were also more people with the courts and whiting forensics, with the judges and their family members, and people involved with the spill law and games there, with people with whiting forensics since I was a kid. People tied to Joshua Julian, involved with them with wire crimes, now with digital crimes too, tied to that. Cover-up methods of it, where they change in fake digital, which actually digitally recorded, and phone conversations. So the FBI can't be trusted. So I have to communicate with through social media, through YouTube, through my YouTube channel. They have criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought readings of statutes and precedents regarding the validity of what is said with social media. This is real life, more so than their courts where they've been putting fake things in the databases there. I'll stop. Make sure I get it on paper in New Britain Superior Court. And the rest of the confessions tied to the Michael Emmett too. He hid a bunch of things to record it tied to him. And I never got to speak. And they pretended otherwise just by the number of phone calls and them changing and faking things. And they kept making more confessions and confirmations and then leaving a whole bunch of messages. So I had to call back. And I still didn't get anyone to speak because they keep putting people to fake things. They're using between each of the campuses I went to and next to them. Our name was who had time collusion /S with the ones with the murders and untimely deaths, and that brought and other things that brought up the principal child abusers campus to me before that was proven, including with it forced on Facebook. Facebook has roles with the Joshua Julian, with the FBI too, and Wethersfield police. They attached me to fake conversation with Wethersfield police at the station when I was a kid, and I was an adult too, with different ones, but one's tied to that Mendez family as the ones who did it when I was an adult. They have rules with the Phil Colol further on my street with their extended family members too on the street. I don't know where Phil Colol lives, but he was on the street further involved with a Bob Chase and people with some rape threats regarding the kids that they force abuses of sexual and medical. There's a Leahy family with their kids, and a Brian Silver with the prosecutors and judges' kids involved further with the same house /S and people tied to them, putting fake things, fake ties to the other kids, spreading lies about them, taking their pictures and their people and make it look like they know them. In other words, increasingly as their roles next to the state capitol is one of the things that connects people who did things like that all along Route 3 and Route 175 from the founding locations, connects them too. And these are people also with public schools and private schools collusions, and with campuses, fire and medical too. Increasingly, people next to Hartford Hospital have overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and fire department campuses and police departments with those houses and business there. and involved personally and professionally with names next to campuses intercities, where they're planting predicate acts with facts, method / as roles with the names at and next to the campuses and all sides of criminal and civil cases in the courts at the same time, including in the World Trade Center attack in New York City, as the ones involved with such in Connecticut, as ones involved too with Washington, D.C., a bunch of ways with this. 2 speech class teachers I had increasingly have roles of proven child abusers, leaders of kids, including their roles with sexual medical offenders of kids and delusions, including their roles with ones with badges who are doctors, psychiatry, tactically delusions, just identity, they just put fake conversations, fake ties between people. I don't even remember their names, those 2 speech class teachers. But all along Route 175, people involved with that. Mike Pandall has roles with people on with depositions, all sides of depositions, all sides of criminal and civil cases, with people all along roads and routes like Main Street in Hartford, and conjunctions to it like Park Street. All along Park Street, there's a Lena's Pizza on Park Street, and like a tiki bar with a Daryl Sullivan, and a bunch of people tied to him, and Lance Cuddy involved further with the people with sexual and medical offenders of kids at the campuses, including the people that work at the campuses, and the differences of guilt, because they use methods by that with the people with off campuses roles with that. Increasingly, these are people with town lines roles with in corners of streets and exceptions. But they're refusing to identify themselves interbranch legitimately so they can hide how recorded that also their roles with the executive branch, the judicial branch, and people at the corrections offices, judicial branch offices, involved with organized crimes and organized crime methods, identity theft, fraud, slanders instances, and, worse than just fake news, but news predicate acts, to use a phrase of the president / chief. No, each campus lied, even to the presidents / chiefs. They replaced what our founders communicated, even though it's declassified. Black pupils, here, stand them. To stand the premises treatments. Don't attack the names, attack the premises treatments and exceptions. Exception nature, don't leave them out. We're going to examine how people got away with pretending that science spoke legitimately for any location / S in position, any one of them. Black pupils. See president / chief too. The way is hypernative pure. How could we have the Constitution on a bridge? Native Americans can't even have the people of them liberated from being tactically denatured. And from the cost of everything, like the shaping it, better than free, we go like that. In other words, the countries that shouldn't have the means to be fighting each other and have nuclear threats on each other and all these things like that, that's the solution. While we're in still, this is before cars, when colonists that were tortured, while they're tortured, extorted, and enslaved, they wanted to build better, safer, better identity grounds or identity relation to itself, water. And nature just went downhill. Only way to make America or any country great again is to be led by nature. How it gets great. It gets greater here, our special difference, Earth's, or it forces it from here. We could be systems other. We could all agree to be, but it just forced it from here. These are IDs. Force space nature transfer. Nature being its identity to the extent we can discern. So I'm referring to it as nature, not its identity. Because the parts of its nature, the parts of its complete self come with that individual value progression that we can discern. Where Howard is showing us is not our species bodies, it's not the other species bodies, but it is that one identity value progression that is all things anyway. Again, should many pray. And Bach sings, but makes us shush to hear. Who really try? It speaks not with sound, but shush. It prefers the shush sound. I was saying that, and if you notice, what's his name? Rolly Romero fought Orion Garcia. And the first time he lost. And I was saying on social media, there's a record somewhere. All he has to do is take that shit, change, go closer to the shirt sound, and his style will improve immediately. And he did, and he won. He won the fight. Shout out to Rolly Romero. I don't know if he heard that through the grapevine. Tank Rolly. What's his name? Tank Davis said on Twitter, he would fight whoever called him out on that Twitter because he was fighting. He was feeling crazy at the time. Whoever called him on that Twitter post, I called him out. Rolly, please. Okay, because in other words, I can show you, I could beat him. I could spot him the weight. I could still make 130. I'm sure. I mean, I have to, in other words, take me a couple, 2-3 weeks. But I mean, I'll fight 135, 139. What is it? Tank Davis. It would be a great fight for the people. So, Tank Davis, I appreciate that 2 days, Dave. I'm the guy who accepted your thing on Twitter. I'm kicked off of Twitter/X. FBI has some obscure pictures on Twitter too. I reported it to X too. There's nothing done about it. This is more money scam with that, and more worse than they're talking about in the news. Though I tell you, more scams just with Hartford Hospital with names with the same house/S, involved with child abusers, with Institute Living, with prosecutors and judges, all kinds of scams with their family members. And with the news at the same time, other communications, the rules with interviews, planting evidence, and sequential, pretending integrity. In other words, there are more World Trade Center predicate acts rules that our countries had at the same time with a hyper foreign. The same one that had the southern colonies and northern colonies distinctly rolls with itself to discern, to use functionally how sickly non-distinctly was left out by everyone with their logic and reason, even though everyone could discern it. It measured and maintained. What nature was demonstrating about that blamed on other things other than ourselves, styles, needs, and natures, only allowed to be heard. In other words, we don't have free speech. They have criminal and ceaseless natures of examples of it. In other words, roles with the names of the people of sciences, including the arts. Prepare our hearts and hear this phrase, criminal insidiousness. Because the FBI taught you wrong. The CIA, the other countries' intelligence, when they speak together too. There have been systems tactical terror from humanities when it's not as criminal insidiousness. We're going to examine how we have black pupils, whites of eyes. A breaching method reassigned that. And they have the audacity to pretend it's debatable when they blame other things, others ourselves, including our founders. Including when they bring up the George Washington and all that and their information regarding it. They leave out about the extortion and counter-extortion, why and how it had to be. They're locking our founders, forced locked to those words. Entertained in those narratives, like their narratives regarding what caused their roles with the American Revolution. The breaching method locked them, pretending it's about T-tax, while slavery was entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies. The breaching method locked them roles, blaming other things other than themselves. And James Madison themselves, our founders, communicated for us to communicate about that for ourselves and for them. Black pupils. Not one campus had an identity of what had an iota of our integrity. We're in Howard County. Come off them though. Forgiveness is to blame the fact, shape, and nature, quality aspects of nature itself. As criminally foreign influence, nature has criminal insidiousness. / hyper-criminally foreign influence. Nature shows us that the different countries and different criminal enterprises, including private ones, had roles with that. And then America's founders were trained, were born. Vaccines. And see, President/Chief, nature itself shows us that Native Americans had the same breaching method against them. And they still do, as we all still do. This is a breaching method that uses differences, tactile ulterior, from how nature shows us. We have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. It's teaching us about difference. It communicates to us about difference in ways that we are not being allowed free speech to appreciate. We have a mass identity theft fraud slander method, stacking exceptions that show the same thing, but fake exceptions, little magic tricks. Black people. So other people I went to campuses will tell you this. They have roles. In other words, the only ones who would pretend other, it's recorded too. They're influenced, to pretend fake things, as the ones involved further with the police and courts putting fake things with the campuses and refusing to get on paper. Has something to do with the roles all along the Berlin Turnpike too, before the heart of Hartford. And 3 spots at the end of the Berlin Turnpike. Increasingly, people tied to judges in the corrections offices and judicial branch offices with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and people involved with the World Trade Center attack, and putting predicate acts with facts behind people's backs with conversations with people's educators, putting fake things in databases, including with investigators or such. It's important to get them on paper, one name and sequence. I want a response for the Michael Emmett too. The other things I recorded him involved with some sexual and medical offenders of kids and retired Wethersfield police chiefs. I want them on paper now for the people involved with some violent threats too. And people put fake ties to me with the news with them too at the corners of the streets. More people with the name O'Neill involved. Intercampuses with West Hartford campuses and next to them. Also with foreign and domestic military like Eric Burgess. People involved with people with the name O'Neill. I don't know which campus if it's that one near West Farms Mall. Also involved with people with intercities in New Britain. In that spot I never saw him there. I never went on the campus on that field. A Joseph Dennis, a John Dennis. People all along Route 175 from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield have roles of people through time that try to put fake ties, fake nature ties to me. And as roles with time collusions with all that when it was brought up with the different instances, all kinds of falsified police reports, roles intercities. These are people that already have roles all sides of cases in the courts themselves, collusions with the crime scenes, including body dumping spots. Same ones with the campuses. Forgiveness is so we can focus on the predicate acts. Get me off the fake conversations with WFSB, Channel 3 News. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the physical law on my street and with campuses with child and sexual and medical offenders. Identity theft, fraud, slanders with them, wire crimes with them. Let's get them on paper, one name and sequence with the courts too, and lawyers too. Collusions with the crime scenes, all sides of the case with differences. No difference, black people. Yeah.